Hi, and welcome. My name is Elizabeth. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm really glad you're here. I have another true crime story for you today. Another one that's a thinker question about where the line is. What's the line that separates fantasy and reality? When do thoughts become punishable? Are thoughts punishable at all? Really quick disclaimer as a fierce fierce LGBTQIAA plus ally and advocate. I know that as humans, we are in no way responsible for what turns us on. This is not something we choose. We don't choose what we're attracted by. It's something we discover. It's not something we choose. And as long as all parties involved are in complete consent, do as you will, more power to you. If it's part of your path to happiness, I give you my full blessing. When it comes to fantasy, where is the line? And is there a line? And do we hold our police officers to a higher standard? They have access to information the general public doesn't, so maybe. Trigger warning. Today's case will discuss cannibalism as well as kidnapping, torture, and murder. But I promise, absolutely none of those things actually happens in this story. Confused? Well, join me for the ride. Okay, this story is about Gilberto Valle. Known as Gil to his family and friends, which is what I will probably refer to him as, that or Valet. He was raised in Queens, New York. He was born in 1984 on April 14th, and he is one of two children of Gilberto Valle II and Elizabeth Lopez. He describes his mom as the caring, loving, wonderful, sweet parent, and his dad as the one that will kick you in the butt for not acting right. He says that his parents were divorced when he was quite young. He was raised in a Catholic family, so, sex just wasn't a topic up for discussion. Okay, so it said that he made good grades. He loved baseball. Baseball was like his big thing. Once he discovered baseball, that was like his life. As he was growing up and he was a teen and whatnot. And after graduating from high school, he attended the University of Maryland, where he majored in psychology. And like I said, he was said to have made pretty good grades. While attending the University of Maryland, he would make a group of friends, group of college kid friends. To use a parlance, I think maybe from my generation. He was friend zoned. I got the feeling like there were different girls in his group that he liked, or maybe had like tried to see if they were interested and they weren't. It was just, we're just friends. And, so he seemed like the guy that didn't actually get anywhere romantically with girls. But again, at this point, this is just my conjecture, but I think I'm correct. We'll see. So now he graduates and he takes the police entrance exam. He gets a 99% on it, and he becomes a police officer, and he is working in Morningside, the neighborhood of Morningside or Morningside Heights. It's in Harlem. So he's about 23, 24 when he goes on, I think, eHarmony, and it doesn't really make any connections. So he goes on OkCupid, and on OkCupid, he meets a woman by the name of Kathleen Mangan. And by 2012, they would be married with a new little baby girl at home. And Kathleen would be the very first woman that Gil would have relations with in real life. She would report that once the baby came, Gil didn't seem very interested in their sex life, and that she says oftentimes when they were together, he couldn't finish unless he went to the bathroom and took care of himself. Gil also reported that their sex life to him was very vanilla. And don't worry, I will explain why he felt this way. So during Gil's downtime, when he wasn't on duty as a police officer, and his wife and baby were sleeping, but he was still awake, he would go onto some websites that could be described as concerning. No, disturbing. Yeah, disturbing. So Gil spends his nights off chatting on a fetish site for people who are turned on by cannibalism. Yeah, I said cannibalism. Turned on by cannibalism. No kink shaming. No kink shaming here. As long as everybody is in agreement. Don't think anyone should be eating other people, but we'll get there. So his chat history is like super, super disturbing. He is turned on by the idea of trussing up a woman like a turkey. He said the idea of a woman being in a baking pan, like bent up with like an apple in her mouth, is like totally his kind of kink. I'm sorry, I don't mean to make a face that it's not my kind of kink, but again, you don't choose, you discover, and as long as everybody is in agreement, more power to you. So Gil would frequent a website called the darkfetish.net. And there he would find other people who were turned on by the same kinds of things that he was. So Gil would engage in a great deal of chatting about kidnapping girls, R-wording girls, stripping and preparing girls to be cooked, cooking and eating girls. Yes, that's what I said. Oh my God, I can't believe this was working out of my mouth. Yes, and he wrote about it. So Gil would say that when he was on these sites that he would start to really get into it, and he would find other people and they would sort of try to one-up each other, like, oh, you think that's bad? Check this out, kind of thing. Or that his reason for why the fantasies in the chat room seemed to go so very far was because he was getting this positive reinforcement, these reactions that were, this is cool stuff, dude. This is, your mind is working great. This is what I think. This is how I feel. That just made him ratchet it up. So that's what he would say, that's how it became so much and so extreme in his chats. He had become somewhat close with a few different members on these sites. One was by the name of Moody Blues, one by the name of Ali Khan, and then another who used his actual name for his screen name. With these members, his fantasies would go far. They would make plans together, and they would where they would carry out the plans, and who they would try to take, and where they would take them, and what they would do with them when they got there. And he would say things like, my basement has a pulley system that we could, I guess, drain the blood out of a girl, and that he had an oven big enough, if he folded the girl in half, he had an oven big enough to roast a girl in his basement. He also said that he had a secluded house in the woods where he had a spit big enough to roast a human on, as well as fridge and freezer as needed. So after months of Gil spending more and more and more time on the computer and less and less and less time with his family, his wife decided it's time to do something. She says that she worried about him having an affair. I think she probably just wanted to know what he was doing. I can get being like, is it Minecraft? Is it porn? Is it an emotional, cheating situation where you're just chatting with some other girl who's nice? Like, what is it? What is so entertaining about it? So what she did was you go, girl. You go, girl. She put spyware on his computer, the kind of spyware that tracks every single keystroke and takes a picture every 5 minutes of what's on the screen. So the next morning, she would look into the spyware, and there it was, black and white, probably some color as well, what Gil had been doing. So she starts to read through all of this, and she says that She found some really upsetting fetish websites, and that they were more than just like basic S&M. Basic S&M. There at one point, Gil will start to refer to S&M as vanilla for him, like vanilla S&M. But so she said that some of the pictures really looked like the women were deceased. Okay, she found his screen name. Want to guess what his screen name was? His screen name was Girl Meat Hunter. And in her searching, she finds an email account that she knows nothing about. So she uses the password that he says he uses for everything that she knows about. She's his wife. And it gets her right in. Oh, people are so not smart. I mean, it's just a silly choice. I mean, I'm thrilled that he used his same password and she was able to get right in. But in there, she would find pictures and details of her friends, of people she knew, as well as information about herself. And she said there were like thousands of pictures. So Gil says that he got home that day from work before he had been like encountered by her, before she had been, she told him what she found. He had closed all of his accounts. And it was the night after she found the proof. And he swears that, he closed the account because he knew it was wasting too much of his time and it was time to be over this. And he swears to one thing and then his chat say something else. He did say that he was closing the accounts on the chat for... Do I have a ghost? Apparently, Tyrion wanted to be part of the story. Oh, no. My friend's niece fell down. That's very sad. We'll give her a better spot. Okay. Sorry about that. Ghosts and all. He did say that he was closing the accounts on the chat for... Do I have a ghost? Apparently, Tyrion wanted to be part of the story. Oh, no. My friend's niece fell down. That's very sad. We'll give her a better spot. Okay. Sorry about that. Ghosts and all. I'd say, I need to close my account. To some people, he says, I'm closing my account so I don't get caught. What does that mean? Now... Because Gil is a police officer, right? Remember in the beginning when I said, do we hold police officers to a higher standard? And I think in some ways we do. Just in the fact that police officers have access to information that the general population does not have access to. So Gil's wife is really concerned and scared, and she packs up the baby and she packs up her stuff and she goes to her parents' house and she calls the FBI. So it's at this point that the authorities become involved. Now, Valle would be indicted on October 25th, 2012 for conspiring to kidnap and with violating the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act for using his access to the New York Police Department police database for non-law enforcement purposes, which is a violation of that policy. So, Gil is put into jail, but because he's a police officer, for his own safety, they have to keep him segregated. So he's basically in solitary for 7 months. So the police officers who had been his coworkers and friends turned their back on him completely. Now, usually you hear about the Blue Brotherhood and the Blue Line and how, an officer does something that is suspect and they rally around him. Well, this was not the case at all. They were like, what did he write? I'm out of here. I don't have anything to do with him. He's nuts. So this is such a taboo subject that even in the places where you would expect there to be some loyalty, there just isn't, because it is so taboo and we find it to be so upsetting, this idea of like it's bad enough to want to like R word and kill, but consume. Well, thank you for coming to my TED Talk. So after the arrest, he asks his wife asks him if he ever put any of her information on the sites, and he says no. But he did. There it is in black and white. Her stats, her height, her weight, the fact that she's the mother of a baby, and a picture. Then there are the lovely chats where he talks about how he wants to kill her and make her suffer. She's totally horrified, understandably so. Things that he writes about her are devastating. I mean, I would think they would be devastating to anyone. He says it's hard to hear her talk about how it affected her. He says that none of what he was doing on the dark fetish net ever touched his other life. He says he was a good husband, father, and police officer. In the same breath that he's sharing his wife's picture and her stats and talking about how great it would be to do these terrible things to her. Okay, so let's take a step back and talk about fantasy versus real life. Okay, IRL, right? So Gil discovered at a young age that a woman being tied up was very arousing to him. He says he discovers this when he saw a movie with a woman tied to a post. And again, no kink shaming. As long as he can find somebody who is a consenting partner, he can engage in whatever it is he wants. But in this case, Gil doesn't have any partners. His entire adolescence is spent taking care of himself. And being online, where his fantasies would be able to ramp up to this incredible level. And because Gil didn't have any real life experience to compare to the fantasies, he wasn't able to define the difference between real life experiences and fantasy, and he never learned what it was like to actually be with someone. So this leads me to the question, is he an incel? For those of you who don't know what an incel is, it's this young man movement where they call themselves involuntarily celibate. So these men they're so angry with women as a whole because they haven't been able to experience real world sexual experiences. Instead of looking inward to see like what is it about them that like is unattractive to women that gives them the ick factor or gives them the like, I don't think I want to be with you. They look outward and they blame society and they blame women as a whole. So they're just, as a movement, pretty angry. What's concerning about what Gil finds attractive in these situations is that these are really not consensual situations. A woman tied up against her will, against her will, that's a problem. R-worded, hung upside down and drained of blood and then cooked in. This is about complete domination. This is not about entering into a agreed upon partnership where everybody gets what they need out of the experience. This is these fantasies of his are complete dominance. And I honestly think that if Gil had been given the chance to experience like real world sexual partners, especially as he was growing up, it might not have gotten so extreme with his online activities. It seems like his addiction to online porn caused him to look to more and more extreme behaviors to keep his arousal up, because that's how humans work. So the gap between his fantasies and real world experiences grew and grew and grew until his real world experiences would never, ever be enough for him. No, I have no idea how someone goes about fixing this situation, but that's not why I'm here. I can't save the world. I can tell you this crazy ass story though. Okay, so let's talk about the law, right? So where is the line in the law? Okay, so before we get to the trial, we're going to talk about how the laws have changed over the years. Before the early 1900s, if someone entered, just as an example, someone entered a shop to steal all the money from the register, but there's no money in the register, that attempted robbery could not be punished. So if the shopkeeper was like, officer, this man just tried to steal the money from my register. Really, where's the money? Well, there wasn't any. Well, then you didn't do anything wrong. And in violent cases, it was also this way. So if someone comes after you, let's like forget another silly example. Someone comes after you with a bat and they are swinging and they're trying to smash your head in. And somehow you are managing to get out of the way at the last second. And you find a police officer and you say to them, this man is trying to hit me with this bat and possibly kill me. And the officer would have to say, but he hasn't hit you yet. So let me know when he hits you and then I can do something. And I get if you haven't done it, you shouldn't be punished for it yet. But human nature is just so much more nuanced than that. So what happened was in the early 1900s, they changed the law defined as a dangerous proximity to success. So that guy with the bat who's swinging at your head, he's got a dangerous proximity to success on hitting you. Ultimately, it was converted in the 1960s, replaced proximity with substantial step. So a substantial step towards committing the crime. Over the years, the laws grew and changed. Now we have something that's called an overt act. An overt act does not need to be an illegal act. Okay? So for instance, when To Catch a Predator sets up a time and place for the older man to come meet the younger girl, and the man arrives at the meeting place with White Claw and condoms, that's an overt act. No, it's not illegal for him to be at the place where he is. It's not illegal for him to have White Claw or condoms. But those actions, coupled with the chat that got them there, is punishable by law. Okay, so the offender took steps in the real world towards the plan that was discussed online. Okay. Now, what has dramatically changed all of this is the internet. Because before the internet, people's thoughts just weren't public like they are now. People can spout from the mountaintops, but in the internet, everyone can hear them about really how they feel about things, right? And we can find history of chats and histories of emails and what people said and what they were thinking. And it's just more out there for public consumption. So, what was Gil's overt act? Was there an overt act? This is the question. Gil would have a jury trial. The defense argues that the chats are just storytelling. Okay, the prosecution says it's actually a window into his thoughts. The FBI says that in 2012 alone, Gil would sign on to that website, the dark fetish website, over 1,000 times. He also accessed the site from his iPhone while he was on active duty. It's very sticky. This whole thing is so very sticky. So what exactly is the legal thing that he did wrong? Acting on ideas through storytelling should not be considered reality or something punishable, right? Acting on the ideas, yes, but just discussing the ideas and having the storytelling just be the only thing that you do. So where's the line? Fantasy and reality. Okay, it grows fuzzier and fuzzier, and the internet invites us to be ourselves and to be someone not ourselves in complete equal measure at the same time. And it's just it's not clear. There's nothing clear about all of this. As an avid reader, as you may have realized, like my stance is like literature can't be illegal. Has anyone heard of Matt Shaw? For instance, you can't purchase his novels. No third-party bookseller will ever sell you some of his novels. There are some of his novels you can get, but some of them you can only purchase directly from his website in PDF form because the subject is so subversive that Amazon doesn't want to be affiliated with that. But this is in no way illegal. It's just writing. It's storytelling. It's not even pictures, it's words. So is the problem that Gil used his privilege as a police officer to use the database to look up information on girls that he was discussing on the dark websites. Like, is that the line that's crossed? And yes, he does do that, but we'll get into more details. The argument in the trial about whether an overt act has taken place, whether he's really done something that's punishable, comes down to 3 very specific chats. There's 24 chats that are found and used in the trial, but they end up really arguing over 3 because of the 21 of the 24, when he was asked if he was serious about what he was discussing, his response was that he was not. However, 3 of the 24 are up for debate on if these are the proof that Gil was beginning to cross a line. In these chats, when asked if he really means it, he says things like, yes, if I was sure I could get away with it. We're still at words, okay? In these chats, he would explain the property he owns with the girl-sized spit, the pulley system in the basement, the oven big enough. He talks about stalking specific girls, and he says that he has a kidnap/R-word kit. So those are very disturbing things. But do they exist in real life? One of the most disturbing things, I think, for the jury was this whole thing about his friend from college, Kimberly. So Gil he shares with his online friends, with this Ali Khan and this Mike person and this Moody Blues person, pictures of his friend from college, Kimberly. And he shares photos that she put on Facebook, which is completely legal. Anything that you put out on Facebook or you put out into the internet, anyone can take and use for whatever they want. It's just how it is. So that's why, if you're young, your parents always said, be careful what you put on the internet. Okay? So he shared her picture and her name, and they started having this collective fantasy of kidnapping, torturing, cooking, and eating her. And Gil had written up a document called A Blueprint for Cooking Kimberly. And as these chats are sort of ramping up, Gil and his wife and his baby end up going to Maryland for the weekend to visit some of his college friends, it sounds like. Just like a weekend to go see some friends. But in his chats, he's talking about how he's going to see Kimberly. And he's going to size her up, and he's going to check her out, and he's going to be... Now, the way he talks about it, it sounds like he's literally stalking her. But the thing is that when they meet up with each other in real life with his wife and his child, there is no suspicious behavior at all noted. It's all just like whatever it is he's thinking or what information he's collecting, he's keeping it in his head. It is not in real life. Now, his wife does report that when they got home from that Maryland trip, pretty far drive, the first thing he did was get online and start chatting with his friends. And turns out it was about seeing this girl. He reported back to them and said things like, she looks delicious. I want to take a bite of her girl meat. So it sounds like he's reporting in, like he did collect some information on his stalking trip and here, but again, he's not doing anything in real life. So the verdict would come down in March of 2013, and he was found guilty. Immediately, his attorney makes a motion for the judge to overturn the verdict on the grounds that not enough evidence has been presented. The judge holds off on ruling the motion immediately and takes it under advisement. Some of the jurors are interviewed, and they ask them, what is it that made you think that he had moved out of the realm of fantasy and into the real reality world? So the fact that he shared photos of people he knew in his life, that he created this blueprint for cooking Kimberly, that he had a list of materials that he needed, rope, car, chloroform, duct tape, plastic tarp. He looked up how to make chloroform on the internet. some of the chats he had were very clear on the fact that this is make-believe. They would say, if you really had the chance, would you? And he'd say, no, I don't think so. What about you? No, probably not, and at the top of this page, of course, it says, all of this is make-believe. This is not real life. This is just so that those of us who have these, what are considered darker thoughts, have a safe place to share it. He would be in these chats and like specifically Moody Blues would say like, okay, great. I heard you have Kimberly's address. Can I have it? And Gil would be like, no, I can't do that. I can't actually give you her address. Okay. Here's what I think the first mistake was. What the FBI usually does when they try to infiltrate like these dark fetish websites and engage with potential criminals, and then try to get them to see if they will commit an overt act, right? So it's like I said with the to meet a predator, he's got condoms and White Claw, and he's meeting a 14-year-old. That's an overt act. If all he did was chat about it online, that's actually not illegal. So even though he's saying creepy and sick and depraved and awful things online, that is not illegal. It's creepy. It's upsetting. I don't want to read about it, but it's not illegal. So the authorities would have to wait until a plan is made and then meet up with that person in the real world. And when they meet up with that person and they have, duct tape, ropes, knives, and, in a bag, now an overt act has happened, right? Now a true conviction can be made. Did Gil ever take an overt step? Did he ever really commit an overt act? A physical, in real life act? It's agreed by most people that they think that Gil was found guilty because it's just such a subversive topic that they were terrified that someone who would find this interesting would take the next step and make it real. He's actually not there to hear the verdict, and everyone in the jail, when he's found guilty, is shocked. They're like, but there's no evidence. What? Like I said, the judge agrees to delay the sentencing, and boy, does he take his time. So once the trial is completed and the public has sort of figured out that the police are not, like, he's not being supported by the other police, he's able to move into the general population in the jail. He actually, the warden has to have a sense of humor because he gets put in the kitchen. He gets kitchen duty and ends up cooking. And, like, it becomes this big joke, because he was a cannibal. But he wasn't a cannibal. That's the thing. Like, yes, he fantasized about it, but he never actually did it. Life is a little better for him, right? He only has to spend, I think, 7 months in what's basically solitary. And then he's able to actually make a couple of friends and life isn't quite as horribly devastating. In June 2014, so it's over a year since the verdict came down, the judge issues his ruling. He's overturning the conviction. Here's the nutty thing. Usually what happens at this point is not overturning a conviction. It's, we're going to retry. Let's have someone else. We're going to look at that try didn't work so great. We're going to retry your case. No. Overturns the conviction. And the judge explains why the verdict must be overturned. 1, Gil doesn't own property in the woods. There's no girl-sized oven. There's no spit. There's no pulley system. The basement of his building where he lives is where the entire building does their laundry. That's it. That's just laundry facilities. There's no pulley system. This is complete make-believe. While he had a list of things he would put into a kit, he didn't have any of those things. He didn't actually physically have a kit. The chats that had distinct plans to meet, often the days would come and go and nothing would happen. And the plans that the jury seemed to find most upsetting were plans that he had with 3 different people in 3 completely different places, like 2 different states in America and like 1 in like Pakistan or something, like a completely different country. He probably had this all planned for the same day to keep his stories straight, you know, like if that's the date, then he can just to keep straight. It was physically impossible for these plans to come to fruition. Physically impossible. Could not happen. So, and the judge says, you know, like, clearly the date would pass and then the fantasy would be over and they'd start a new one. The misdemeanor of the misuse of the police computer database stands, but he's charged with time served and he's let out of jail with an ankle monitor because the prosecution appeals the overturn verdict, because that's the way things go. So, a juror is interviewed after the overturn, and it's really telling, I think. So this juror says that she feels totally betrayed because they agonized over their decision. She says they took the kidnapping charges very seriously. They went through all the details. She says that the chats about the planning to kidnap that one girl was just somehow different from all the rest. And it felt like he was really taking steps to make his fantasy real. They had read them over and over and over until they just couldn't take it anymore. It was so disturbing. Now that sounds to me like they read it over and over and over again and were like, this is gross. We have to just find him guilty. This is gross. We can't deal with this. We can't let this person who thinks this way out onto the world. But the thing is that we don't put people behind bars for their thoughts. Period. You have to actually do something wrong. And none of the things that could be considered an overt act were done. So it's really interesting because the judge ends like a bunch of his explanations with like, this could not be possible in reality, could only occur in fantasy, not possible to be done. Like, so Valle separately appeals the judgment of the conviction of the CFAA count, which is the misuse of the database system. And ultimately, they reverse that as well. So in other words, Gil Valle is completely exonerated. Spent 21 months in jail. Fetish experts try to explain that sometimes very subversive things can be sexual towards certain people. Again, we don't choose what we're aroused by. But Gil was raised in a community that didn't talk about sex at all. Okay. Eventually, Gil would say that it was a relief to get it all out, that these things were trapped in his mind for a long time, and he felt like he could never share that with anyone. And once it's out, he at least is more honest, and he also knows that he could never actually do any of these things. He says, I couldn't hurt a fly, which is not what you want to hear from a police officer. Story comes out, and he is approached by a TV news program, I think Dateline, and a documentarian. Both try to convince him to let them cover his story. He decides on the documentary. Now, it turns out that the documentarian tried to ingratiate herself with him, like become friendly with him, like he thought they were friends, which anytime anyone makes a documentary about you, they are not your friend. They may be friendly, they may be kind, they may seem to care, but they're doing a documentary. So they're looking hopefully for the truth. Now, I don't feel like the documentary, it's called Thought Crime, The Case of the Cannibal Cop. This is not the highest quality documentary as far as I'm concerned. The documentarian actually came out and said that she wanted to create a documentary that half the people would walk out and feel one way about, and half the people would feel another way about. And the thing about documentaries is that that's not how to approach a documentary. You approach a documentary by, I want to tell this story. And then the audience reacts the way they react, because the documentary is supposed to just be, this is what happened. This is the reality of this situation, right? So by the director having an ulterior motive of trying to make it controversial, you know, what do you think? What do you think? I feel like there's a little too much of her spin on things. So there are there are a lot of shots of Gil with his face just sort of like swathed in that blue computer light, and she put typing sounds in the background. So it's almost as if we're watching him type into these fetish sites. There's also a lot of shots of Gil cooking because his fantasy was cannibalizing girls. Seems to be a very deliberate choice, right? Also, I remember thinking when I first saw it, like, why is this man who has a new baby never mentioning his child? Like, never, ever mentions his baby once. And it seems so strange. And I was like, I don't know about this guy. So, and then the documentary ends with Gil talking about how maybe he'll get to meet a girl who actually accepts what turns him on and will maybe even participate safely. It's creepy. It's real creepy. But I think that's what the documentarian was going for. And they kind of did him dirty. They really kind of did. Especially since he reports that he never sat in front of the computer ever for the documentarian. So that was him watching TV. And that he spoke about his baby daughter all the time. It just all got cut out. So, yes, documentaries are what really happened, but you have to remember that the editing can make a huge difference. So after the documentary came out, Gil decided that he wanted to write a memoir. It's called The Raw Deal. Raw Deal came out in 2017, and it is the true story of NYPD's Cannibal Cop. It's the memoir of Gil Valle. It's described as a look into the online world of dark sexuality and violence that most people don't know exist, except for maybe in their nightmares. But in The Raw Deal, we learn some really, I think, interesting pieces of information. The first thing is that before his wife put the spyware on his computer, so and this is actually, I think, pre-baby, she would find a website open on his computer that was like an S&M website. And she asked if that was something that he was maybe into and if that was something that maybe he wanted her to do with him. And he was excited and he said, yeah, I think that might be great. And there was a sex store that he went to get like the things that they would need. And he says he literally couldn't get himself out of the car to go into the store. So nothing ever came of that S&M conversation with his wife. And the fact that he couldn't even go into the store with permission from his wife, she said, I'm not sure he would have done anything in real life. But the thing is, he didn't. So this next piece I'm going to share because it's his explanation as to why he would put people's names into the police database computer. So he says that he worked with somebody, or he knew story of somebody who was a police officer. He pulled somebody over. His computer wasn't working, so he wasn't able to run the license plate. If he had been able to run the license plate, he would have known to approach the vehicle with caution. Because he didn't know that, when he got up to the vehicle, he was shot and killed. So he says that before any of his shifts would start, he would check his computer. And he would check his computer by putting in the name of one of his friends, just to see if their information came up correctly. It would. Great. Done. And because Gil wasn't creative enough to come up with made-up girls, because I really think the main thing that really bothers people is that he used real girls' names and pictures, which if I was one of those girls, I would be very disturbed by that as well. But I have a couple of problems with this explanation. Why are they the names of the girls that he's talking to his online friends about? Probably because they're the ones that are in his thoughts and in his mind, and it would have been safer to just not, Like, this is a really sticky point for me. Like, why talk about Kimberly and then look up Kimberly? Like, that's icky. So he tells us the story about how he was offered the documentary and the 48-hour special. Oh, I'm sorry, it wasn't Dateline. It was 48 Hours, sorry. Tells us about, what I told you about how he's really displeased with the fact that it shows them, cooking food and swathed in blue lights and, all this. And he says that he talked about his baby all the time. And okay. So it tells us the very first texts he gets from his wife are like, I want to be able to figure out how we can work this out. And at one point she texts, I believe you love me, but I just as equally believe you want to kill me. He says that from that point on, she really had nothing to do with him. His wife and baby he has no contact with. He has tried to get custody or visitations, and he has not been able to successfully do that. But talk about turning lemons into lemonade. So what does Gil do now? He writes dark fetish books. He writes novels. He figured if everyone really believed what he was writing was actually real, then he must be a good novelist. He must be a good writer. He's published 3 novels in addition to his memoir. They are A Gathering of Evil, A Social Catalog of Prey, and The Lake Tahoe 10 Killings. And each of them, you can look them up and see what the plot lines are. It says, Valle's debut horror novel, and it is not for the squeamish or faint of heart. It is graphic. It is a psychological shock spree that will make even the most hardened fan of horror uneasy. So that's the story of Gil Valle, the cannibal cop who never ate anyone, who never kidnapped anyone, never raised a hand to anyone, never had any of the things that, his fantasies, his dark fantasies that he was writing about. Like, he never had anything in real life, and he spent 21 months in jail. What do you think? Doing research for this has been fascinating. I listened to a podcast. It's Red-Handed. So it's these 2 women from England, and they are like, he's gross, he's disgusting, get rid of him, put him into, he makes me so uncomfortable, icky, And then there's another podcast where he's promoting his book, and he's talking to a couple of podcaster men. And they're like, you didn't do anything wrong. How could they possibly put you in jail? I don't understand. Full show notes are below. All the different things, all the different legal documents and whatnot. You can check them out. If you're still here, thank you so much. If you don't mind, give me a thumbs up. It really, really helps. Until next time, do me a favor and be nice to each other out there and be nice to yourself. And I will catch you next time. Bye.